The meth making you crazy, dog.
Both of you, get back in the closet. You deserve a fucking ass whooping. All of you, get back in the closet. Go fuck yourself.
How much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
They're evil. They are actively doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The right to exist argument has been used now to the point where what it's going to mean is that the Israel you're talking about will include the annexed and illegally occupied West Bank. It's very interesting, the Israeli government has never said where it thinks the borders of Israel really ought to be and what it would settle for. I think it would be an immense help if it tells us where it thinks Israel's boundaries should be. Every other country does do that.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless, and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
Mic check 1 2. Why is my video frozen? There we go. Cool. Alright, we'll start with headlines and then go into more specific stories. They killed like 30 plus people sheltering in a warehouse? Oof. Let's fucking go, dude.
Sumud flotilla.
Fuck, I've been muted this whole time.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.
This shit was muted.
Israeli military strikes have killed at least 30 Palestinians since dawn in South and Central Gaza. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Civil Defense says an Israeli airstrike near a market in Gaza City killed nearly 24 Palestinians, including 6 women and 9 children Wednesday. They were reportedly sheltering from Israeli airstrikes in a warehouse. On Wednesday, Israeli forces killed Dr. Mohammed Akram al-Kafarna, head of the Palestinian Nursing Association in the Gaza Strip, chief nursing supervisor at Kamal Adwan Medical Complex. Meanwhile, Spain and Italy are sending naval vessels to protect the Gaza-bound global Sumud flotilla after activists said drones attacked their boats near Greece. On Wednesday, activists reported multiple drones attacked their boats in the latest attacks on the flotilla. In a statement, the flotilla organizers said, quote, multiple drones, unidentified objects dropped, communications jammed, and explosions heard from a number of boats, unquote. This comes as major news outlets, the BBC, Reuters, the Associated Press, and Agence France Presse, AFP, released a short film Wednesday calling on Israel to allow international journalists into Gaza. The film premiered at a Committee to Protect Journalists event in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. French President Emmanuel Macron says President Trump assured him any attempt by Israel to annex the West Bank would be a red line and would signal an end to the Abraham Accords. This comes as Politico reports that Trump promised Arab and Muslim leaders during a meeting Tuesday he would not allow Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to annex the West Bank. Meanwhile, in Israel, at least 22 people were injured in a drone attack Wednesday. Authorities say the drone was launched from Yemen. This comes days after the Houthis fired a drone at the Red Sea resort city of Eilat in southern Israel. And Israelis protested at Ben Gurion Airport as Netanyahu was departing to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly.
Here to tell the world and the Prime Minister we want to end the war, we want to release the hostages and to finish whatever we're doing in Gaza.
Finish whatever we're doing in Gaza? Fuck off, dude.
Netanyahu will be addressing the UN General Assembly.
What you're doing in Gaza is genocide.
Prime Minister Netanyahu.
I hate that they keep on platforming these Israeli protesters like they're a shining example. They are the exception to the rule that that's a twisted society. There's no praise. No blame, no praise.
Who will be addressing the UN General Assembly and meeting with President Trump in Washington for the fourth time since Trump took office. In Texas, a prisoner in an Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in Dallas was killed on Wednesday when a shooter opened fire from a nearby rooftop. 2 other ICE prisoners were critically wounded in the sniper attack. Investigators say the shooter died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Following the attack, FBI Director Kash Patel posted an image on social media showing unused ammunition he said belonged to the shooter with the words anti-ICE written in blue ink on one casing. Vice President J.D. Vance said, without evidence, the attack was carried out by a, quote, violent left-wing extremist, unquote. While President Trump responded on social media, quote, this violence is the result of radical left Democrats constantly demonizing law enforcement, unquote. The shooter was identified as 29-year-old Joshua Yan with ties to North Texas and Oklahoma. His acquaintances described him to journalist Ken Klippenstein as someone with a vaguely libertarian bent who despised both major parties and politicians generally, a fan of first-person shooter video games, apparently racked up 10,000 games on one website, and the message board 4chan. He once flooded the comment sections of his friends' social media pages with rape jokes. This is the suspect's neighbor, Sherry Gates.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. We know a lot of people in this neighborhood, but I didn't happen to know them. And it's just shocking to me that, our country's come to this point where we can't even talk, we can't share our opinions and ideas without risking being shot or something.
In California, 39-year-old Ismael Ayala Uribe was pronounced dead Monday after he was found unresponsive at the Adelanto ICE Processing Center. Ayala Uribe was brought to the U.S. from Mexico at the age of 4 and lived in Westminster in Orange County, his home, for most of his life. He was approved for DACA in 2012, but his request to renew that protection was denied in 2016. He died one day after he received emergency surgery for an abscess. His treatment came 3 days after he first complained of pain and after his cries for help fell on deaf ears at the privately run ICE jail in California, which operated for profit by the GEO Group. Ayala Uribe is the 14th person to die in federal immigration custody since January. In more immigration news, CNN reports it's identified more than 100 U.S. citizen children from newborns to teenagers who've been left stranded without parents because of immigration actions this year. The parents were arrested by ICE during raids on workplaces ranging from farms to meatpacking plants, coming out of ICE check-ins, or when dropping their kids off at school. In Georgia, lawyers for the prominent Spanish-language journalist Mario Guevara have asked a judge for a temporary restraining order to halt his deportation to El Salvador, which they say is imminent. Guevara has been jailed by ICE for more than 100 days, even though an immigration judge granted him bond. Guevara was arrested while live streaming a No Kings demonstration in June, even though he clearly identified himself as a journalist. He's lived in the United States for some 20 years and has built a large following for his reporting on anti-ICE protests. In China, nearly 2 million people evacuated Guangdong province ahead of Typhoon Regasa's landfall earlier today. The storm brought record-breaking winds and torrential rains with up to a month's worth of precipitation falling over some areas. In eastern Taiwan, officials say 14 people were killed. 13 others remain missing after the typhoon caused a barrier lake to burst its banks, washing away bridges, submerging vehicles, and leaving the ground floors of homes underwater. The cyclone peaked as the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane, is the strongest under worst.
Dude, they were saying this was going to be bad.
Over some area, breaking winds and torrential rains with up to a month's worth of precipitation falling over some areas. In eastern Taiwan, officials say 14 people were killed. 13 others remain missing after the typhoon caused a barrier lake to burst its banks.
Yo. Those are the supports that are like supposed to be holding up the bridge. Oh my god, dude.
Washing away bridges, submerging vehicles, and leaving the ground floors of homes underwater. The cyclone peaked as the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane, is the strongest storm on Earth this year.
Ooh. Strongest storm on Earth this year is crazy.
China's President Xi Jinping said Wednesday his country plans to reduce...
You know... What is it, the Pacific Ocean is the biggest ocean? It's always making enormous hurricanes.
Its greenhouse gas emissions by at least 7 to 10% over the next decade. His landmark pledge in a video address Wednesday to the UN General Assembly came a day after Trump called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
绿色低碳转型是时代潮流。
Green and low-carbon transition is the trend of our time. While some country is acting against it, the international community should stay focused on the right direction, remain unwavering in confidence, unremitting in actions, and unrelenting in intensity.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's appeal to global leaders to stop Russia from driving a new...
China is the world leader in wind energy. I learned that when Trump was dissing China for their windmills at the UN General Assembly, and then the camera pans over to them being like, huh? And I looked it up, and it said China is currently the world leader in wind energy. Which makes sense. They have, like, high elevation mountains and stuff, and it's a very windy collection of biomes over there. So it was just wild, dude.
Arms race, warning the combination of autonomous drones and...
So it was nice to see the president of China being like the only... It's just nice to see a world leader seem to give a shit about climate change, although China has had plenty of time to get their act together. There have been Chinese climate activists raising the alarm bell for decades up to this point. We are so fucked with the climate. Like Xi Jinping is like too little too late, and he's one of the only ones speaking out of it. It's crazy, dude.
and artificial intelligence poses new risks to humanity. Zelensky made the warning during his address Wednesday to the UN General Assembly, where he said Russia will expand its aggression beyond Ukraine if it's not stopped. Separately, Zelensky told Axios he doesn't seek to lead Ukraine once conflict with Russia has ended, saying he intends to organize elections if a ceasefire is reached. On Wednesday, a Kremlin spokesperson lashed out over President Trump's claim Ukraine could claw back territory captured by Russia's full-scale invasion, saying Russia has, quote, no alternative but to continue its war in Ukraine. Former FBI Director James Comey is reportedly set to be indicted on criminal charges in Virginia by next week. This comes just days after Eric Siebert, the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, resigned under pressure from President Trump after he refused to file charges against Comey. Earlier this week, Trump installed Lindsay Halligan, who was his personal lawyer, to replace Siebert. Halligan has no prosecutorial experience. Meanwhile, the FBI says it's found classified documents at former National Security Advisor John Bolton's office last month while executing a search warrant. According to a court filing, the documents reference weapons of mass destruction, the U.S. mission to the UN, and the U.S. government's strategic communications. Bolton became a vocal critic of Trump after resigning in 2019 and writing a tell-all book about his time in the first Trump administration. The state superintendent of public instruction, Oklahoma, has announced plans to install chapters of Charlie Kirk's youth organization, Turning Point USA, at all state public high schools. In a post on social media,
no separation of church and state.
Superintendent Ryan Walters wrote, quote, radical leftist teachers unions have dominated classrooms for far.
This isn't about religious freedom. This is about a theocracy imposing on your freedoms. Okay? This isn't a chapter for interfaith. This isn't like an interfaith thing. This is purely endorsing the Christian God. Full stop. And the state also endorses the Christian God by making Alcoholics Anonymous an approved treatment program where they claim that, alcoholism is a moral failing, basically. Being too far away from God, essentially. Radical left teachers unions have dominated the classrooms for far too long, and we are taking them back. There you go. Spoken like a true conservative, taking without asking first.
For too long, and we're taking them back, unquote. In a press release, Walters detailed how students could start a Turning Point chapter in their schools by gathering at least 3 students and completing a charter agreement.
Now, to be more specific, spoken like a true theocrat, because Democrats can be theocrats too.
Turning Point USA would then send the chapter an activism kit. Walters was asked by a local reporter about what would happen to a school if they refused to establish a chapter of Turning Point USA.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we would go after their accreditation. We would go after their certificates. So, yeah, they would be in danger of not being a school district if they decided to reject a club that is here to promote civic engagement.
Meanwhile,
it's not there to promote civic engagement. Next, you're going to try to get "In God We Trust" emblazoned on the walls. You're going to try to get prayer back in schools. You're not going to stop. And it's a grift. I know he's getting money. I know he's getting donations for doing this horse shit. You're not allowed to take them, but I bet he is.
Oklahoma Republican lawmakers proposed a bill this week that would require all public colleges and universities to construct a Charlie Kirk Memorial Plaza on each.
Are you serious? Bro, be so for real. Oh my god, dude. We live in a fascist nation. For real. That is so fascist. Not only are your tax dollars going to be funding a Turning Point USA chapter in every public school, you're also gonna be paying for a Charlie Kirk Memorial Plaza at every public college.
Each campus that includes a statue of the late conservative activist.
A statue of him everywhere? Really? This is goofy.
Statue of President Trump holding hands with the convicted sex offender
Speaking of statues.
Jeffrey Epstein appeared earlier this week
well
on
done,
Washington, D.C.'s
now.
National Mall and was quickly removed. The installation was titled Best Friends Forever and had a plaque that read, quote, "In honor of Friendship Month, we celebrate the long-lasting bond between President Donald J. Trump and his closest friend, Jeffrey Epstein," unquote. A group called the Secret Handshake had reportedly obtained a permit to install the statue until Sunday, but the U.S. Park Police took down the statue before daybreak on Wednesday. In the New York City mayoral race, Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa says at least 7 wealthy individuals have offered him money to end his campaign. He vowed to remain in the race, where he faces New York Mayor Eric Adams, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, and New York Assembly member Zohran Mamdani. President Trump has previously stated, quote, Cuomo might have a chance of winning if it was a one-on-one, unquote. In response to the report, Zohran Mamdani wrote on social media, quote, "Another desperate attempt by people who can't stand the idea of New Yorkers electing their mayor instead of billionaires buying one," unquote. The Democratic mayoral candidate said.
Not a bad
In
tweet.
France, a judge on Thursday sentenced former President Nicolas Sarkozy to 5 years in prison after he was found guilty of criminal conspiracy for illegally receiving millions of euros from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi to fund his 2007 campaign. Sarkozy is the first former French head of state in the modern era to be convicted of a crime. And the daughter of a New Mexico state legislator is accusing her father of putting the priorities of the Israeli government over his constituents. New Mexico State Senator Jay Block was part of a bipartisan delegation of 250 lawmakers who visited Israel earlier this month for the 50 States One Israel conference, in which they were lobbied by the Israeli government for more funding. After the trip, Block declared Israel is not committing a genocide in Gaza and said the Israeli military is doing, quote, everything possible to avoid killing Gazan civilians, unquote. On Tuesday, 28-year-old Maddie Block called out her father in a TikTok video.
A Republican state senator in New Mexico just got back from his trip to Israel, which was not like a personal vacation, by the way. It was him and a bunch of his other Republican cronies who got invited to Israel for what I can only assume was just like a propaganda trip.
And those are some of the headlines. This
100%.
is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country. And
They're not flying you out there out of the kindness of their hearts.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
Spain and Italy are sending naval vessels to protect the Gaza-bound global Sumud flotilla after activists said that drones repeatedly attacked their boats near Greece on Wednesday. In a statement, the flotilla organizers said, quote, multiple drones, unidentified objects dropped, communications jammed, and explosions heard from a number of boats. Activists also said the strikes on Wednesday marked the 7th attack on the flotilla. The global Sumud flotilla set sail after Israel blocked 2 earlier attempts by activists to reach Gaza by sea.
Passengers aboard the flotilla, there are many boats, include the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg and Nelson Mandela's grandson, the South African MP Mandla Mandela. We're going now to the flotilla to speak with David Adler, the co-general coordinator of the Progressive International. He has a new piece in The Guardian headlined, "We are sailing to Gaza, Here's why. David, we see your hair blowing. We see you're on the ship. Can you explain what has taken place for people who haven't followed this flotilla? What is it, and the significance of Italy and Spain sending their naval ships to protect you?
This global Sumud flotilla is the largest humanitarian convoy in history to traverse the Mediterranean Sea from Barcelona to Tunis to Sicily to here in Crete and onward to Gaza, with a mission that's very simple but very urgent, which is to break the siege and to establish a permanent humanitarian corridor at sea to deliver critical aid to the starving people of Palestine. It is not an exaggeration, Amy, to say that this unprecedented mission, whose vessels number greater than the sum of all previous efforts from 2008 forward of Freedom Flotilla.
Yo, that keffiyeh is so cool looking.
Previous efforts from
Look at her keffiyeh. That is really cool. It's like earth tones. Really cool.
From 2008 forward of Freedom Flotilla and its affiliates to try to reach Gaza has faced bureaucratic sabotage, has suffered from drone attacks in the port of Tunis when we were on the boats and we were attacked with incendiary devices. But most terrifyingly, just here at sea before we entered near to Crete was 2 nights ago, when for several hours there were bombardments. I mean, you have to imagine under the cover of darkness. We can't see these drones, we can hear them, but there's no lights on them. And all we can hear are the sounds of explosions. All we have is CCTV footage of the bombs being dropped onto the boats with an obvious intent to damage beyond repair these sailboats, and therefore to deter the mission from going forward. In many cases, that was successful. Some of the boats were damaged on repair, and others were able to repair them. I think there's one little detail that your listeners and your viewers might be interested in, which is as they're deploying this illegal, deeply criminal act of violence against a civilian humanitarian mission like ours, they also jammed our communication channels with what? With ABBA, with Lay Your Love on Me, which, of course, is a reference, a not so subtle reference, to the Swedish activist aboard Greta Thunberg, as you mentioned in the introduction to the segment, Amy. So it is in the wake of those really terrifying attacks that kept us up all night and put our lives at risk that we put out a message to the world, in particular a message to the governments of the Mediterranean, not just to send a declaration instead of or in recognition of our diplomatic, our humanitarian ambitions, to send books that can not just protect our lives, but can ensure the success of our mission, which is an infrastructural one, is to set up a new corridor to reach the people of Gaza.
Man, the song Lay All Your Love on Me is now cursed for me, like the way Funky Town is cursed for me now. If you know, you know, unfortunately.
When the points on land have been so famously, so infamously blocked from access.
How many boats are there, David?
Right now, we're about 40 boats that have joined together from the 3 fleets, Barcelona, Tunis, or the Maghreb fleet, and the Italian fleet, and we're meeting 6 more boats that are now coming from Greece. We should be between 40 and 50 boats. Again, an unprecedented number of humanitarian vessels that is now setting sail in the final leg to reach the shores of Gaza.
David, you're breaking up a little, so we're going to fix that sound. And while we do, we're going to go to who you just referenced, the Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. This is Greta speaking when the flotilla stopped in Tunisia.
The messages we have to Palestinians in Gaza are many. First, that I'm absolutely disgusted and appalled to live in a world where our people in power every day are betraying Palestinians, and how there are so many people who can seemingly just accept the extreme injustice and the mass slaughtering of people without doing anything. So for that, I am heartbroken, and this is not about me or my feelings at all, but I'm heartbroken to live in that world. What is happening now, for example, in Gaza City should not come as a surprise, because Israel have been very clear from the beginning that this is their intent. They have genocidal intent, that they want to take over the Gaza Strip, which is such a serious war crime. And
Greta Thunberg is like one of the great climate activists of our time, and we're just seeing her as a young person. Like, people in the future are going to be like looking back on her statements like, wow, she was so ahead of her time and stuff, and look how young she looks. Oh my gosh, we know her as like a older matriarch of activism, you know. She will be one of the giants that the next generation stands upon the shoulders of.
And the world has not listened. Right now, people are more and more waking up, but at what cost? What is happening is, of course, an attack on Palestinians, the Palestinian identity, and the Palestinian nation, and all the countless of people whose suffering is being reduced to numbers and UN resolutions. This is also an attack on humanity, on international law, on every sense of humanity we have left, and that is a huge, huge risk. Of course, risk is not the right word. It is a threat to everything we hold dear. What we are claiming to do is to act in line with international law. We are hearing the calls from Palestinians who are urging the people of the world to step up, to end our complicity, and we are doing a very small part of that, the bare minimum, to act to uphold international law, human rights. Any risk we could be subjected to is of course nothing to what Palestinians are risking every day, just trying to survive. For example, the extremely brave Palestinian journalists who we are all in debt for them reporting about what is happening on the ground. They risk their lives every single day to tell the story. And the biggest risk is how we have allowed fascism and racism to escalate to such an extent that history keeps repeating itself.
So that's the climate activist Greta Thunberg. She's one of many activists on board some 40 ships in the Sumud flotilla that have hit by drones. Drop Site News is reporting Trump envoy Tom Barrack admits Israel bombed the global Sumud flotilla ships in Tunisia earlier this month. That's where Greta was speaking. We're talking to live on the ship David Adler, co-general coordinator of the Progressive International.
So, David Adler, just before we finish, if you could say what exactly are you carrying on the ship to Gaza, and what are you calling for now?
We are carrying these ships. Some of them are humble motor cruisers like the family boat where I'm stationed, the lead vessel of the broader fleet. Some of them are even humbler sailing boats, are packed to the gills with basic and critical humanitarian aid, baby formula, medicine, food, and water. However, we're not naive about the scale of the suffering in Gaza and the scale of the humanitarian crisis that requires a much larger and more ambitious response by the states whose good faith obligations under international law require them to respond on the Genocide Convention. So that's why I put so much emphasis on this infrastructural element of our mission. We are not here to drop the aid and go home and pat ourselves on the back.
We have 5 seconds,
We are here
David.
to establish a humanitarian corridor for states themselves to assume their responsibilities and to deliver the aid at the scale that Gaza requires.
David Adler, co-general coordinator of Progressive International, one of the people on board the Sumud flotilla headed to break the siege in Gaza. Spanish and Italian naval ships have gone to protect them. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh for...
It's incredible. So, the Italian Navy initially sent the frigate Fasan, which was later replaced by the Alpino. Here is the Alpino. Alpina was the name of at least 4 ships. Okay, decommissioned, sunk, decommissioned. Okay, launched in 2014. It's this. Is a Carlo Bergamini class frigate of the Italian Navy. Construction and career. It's a big boat. Pretty big boat. Oh shit. That one had a... Is that the Italian flag? Yeah, I guess so. The Italian Navy. And then Spanish patrol vessel Führer. Spanish government dispatched the warship Führer to assist the flotilla, citing the need to ensure the safety of Spanish citizens and uphold international law regarding safe navigation. Here's what the Führer looks like. On 6 May 2020, HMS Sabre tried to ward off Führer, which was making an illegal incursion into what Gibraltar consider its international waters, playing the Spanish national anthem on radio channel 16. Yeah, that's kind of weird, but whatever. Fuck it, we got an Escort. Who gives a shit? Now we're gonna move on to ICE. We'll start with Kyle Kalinski's video.
You know, as per usual, I cannot keep up with the horrors that come out from the ICE Gestapo and what they're up to. So as you all know, Trump decided to super fund the ICE Gestapo and gave them over $100 billion in his big bullshit bill. And basically what they've become is a domestic police force. They're bigger than like the entire budget of the Israeli military and a bunch of militaries around the world. And now they hyper-police this country. And a lot of these people are former or current Proud Boys or from white nationalist groups. You have people from deep red places in America that are signing up to basically go invade blue parts of the country. It's very, very disturbing what's happening. The reason they're all covering their faces is, of course, because they know they're committing crimes and they know what they're doing is not acceptable. And they figure, let me just hide my identity so in the future there can be no accountability and there can be no justice. Nobody can come after me. That's what's happening. That's what it is. All right, so now let me show you this. This is from NBC. ICE held a 5-year-old autistic girl in Massachusetts to pressure the father to surrender, family says. The girl's father, Edward Hipp, has lived in the United States for the last 22 years, according to his wife. So they blurred out this little girl's face, but this is the picture right here. I'm not kidding when I say ICE decided to deny this report, even though there are literal pictures of it. When they get caught red-handed, they really act like whiny little bitches, don't they? They really try to lie and blame and deflect and obfuscate, and they will literally say or do anything to try to get out of trouble. By the way, another thing that just happened, I don't know how many of you guys saw this, but ICE posted this video talking about, like, oh, here's all the people we deported. And they tried to make it like this big compilation with music in the background, and they said like 2 million people or something self-deported, and then another 500,000 or so they deported themselves. And meanwhile, let me just point out, the numbers are totally fucking made up. Like, those numbers are complete. I follow a bunch of immigration experts, and a bunch of them responded to this and were like, you do realize this is like...
Was the music that they played in the background the Pokemon theme song? Gotta catch 'em all?
Completely and utterly fake, right? Like, everything they're saying here is fake with a capital F. Well, at the beginning of that video, they had the comedian Theo Von, and this cell phone video that somebody recorded of him where he goes like, I heard you got deported, dude. Bye. He said some shit like that. And they ran that at the front of it. You know, like basically like memeing and joking about ruining people's lives and getting them kicked out of the fucking country. So Theo Von saw that, and he replied to it and was basically like, don't use me in your fucking videos, please. Don't use me in your videos, because my thoughts on immigration are not like this video portrays them as. I'm not fucking standing here with my pom-poms cheerleading ICE Gestapo thugs cracking skulls. Like, my thoughts are actually more nuanced than that. Now, on the one hand, I look at Theo and I'm like, yeah, but you did kind of back Trump. You interviewed him, he gave him a softball. I think he interviewed JD Vance too, gave him a softball interview too. So, like, I think there's criticism for Theo Von. But, you know, now he's trying to backpedal and get out of the way because he knows that it's no longer cool to be associated
Had dinner
with this
with
fucking criminal
Ivanka
gangster
and
regime anymore.
Kushner.
But so that happened as well. They're trying to use like pop culture and meme their way through their fucking destruction of hundreds of thousands of people's lives. All right, so let me continue here because I got more horror. So this is from Homeland Security. They posted this video, this Gotta Catch 'Em All video, where they basically do they basically make it like Pokemon. They do this. I'll play it. I can't really let the music go because we'll get hit on copyright. I could try to speed it up and maybe that'll help avoid the copyright hit. But it's Gotta Catch 'Em All, but instead of Pokemon, it's like immigrants, and they're like joking about the fact, like, look at us again, we're ruining lives, hooray!
I wanna be the very best. No one ever was. He's not your mind to understand the power that's inside. Must defend. Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all. So true.
This fucking it's so disgusting that they ruined my childhood thing. I was perfect age for fucking Pokemon Mania, right? And I was in it. I had the Game Boy. I had Game Boy Color. I was playing Pokemon in that bitch. I picked Squirtle off the jump. Like I love Pokemon. I got the trading cards. I still got my trading cards, bro. That's like my childhood is being fucking tarnished and disrespected and ruined by these fascist fucks. No, I don't hate Hispanic people. I don't hate brown people. I actually like them quite a bit. Thank you very much. I actually think they add a lot to this country. Thank you very much. And no, you're gonna fucking make a shitty fucking video joking about, oh, look at us, we're ruining more lives. But I'm still not done. Ready for this? So this was in Miami Herald. Hundreds of Alligator Alcatraz detainees dropped off the grid after leaving the site. For the hundreds of men who were detained at Alligator Alcatraz, entering the gates of the makeshift migrant detention center in the Everglades meant exiting the labyrinth but familiar federal immigration process and entering what several immigration attorneys described as an alternate system where the normal rules don't apply. One Guatemalan man detained at the tent site was accidentally deported to Guatemala before a scheduled bond hearing, his attorney said, reminiscent of the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. A 35-year-old Cuban man could not be located at the California detention facility where U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement said they had sent him, leaving his family and attorney frantically trying to determine where he was for more than a week, they said. As of the end of August, the whereabouts of 2/3 of more than 1,800 men detained at Alligator Alcatraz during the month of July could not be determined by the Miami Herald. The Herald had obtained the names from 2 detainee rosters. Around 800 detainees showed no record on ICE's online database. More than 450 listed no location and had only instructed the user to call ICE for details. A vague notation that attorney said could mean that a detainee is still being processed in the middle of a transfer between 2 sites or about to be deported. So in other words, y'all, 1,200 people, we have no idea where they are now. They were taken by the ICE Gestapo thugs, brought to Alligator Auschwitz, and now they're gonzo. And family members and friends and immigration attorneys and experts are going, can a brother get an update? Where are they at? What the fuck? What's going on here? This makes no sense. This isn't legal. They're not even showing up in the online database for our immigration system. These people are acting completely extrajudicially. That's a fancy way of saying this is illegal. This is unconstitutional. This is not allowed. You can't just detain somebody, have no process, no procedure, no due process, no habeas corpus. They're fucking gonzo. And what, you think that there's going to be no accountability for that whatsoever? No. When these people show up, to the extent that they're fucking alive, we don't even know for sure if they're alive. These are all lawsuits waiting to happen. Guys, this is supposed to be, do you understand? This is supposed to be a civilized country. Like, you have rights. You have rights. There are restrictions on what the government can do to you. Because this is what it means to live in a society, live in a civilization that actually gives a shit. And now, they're just ripping all that up and destroying it. They're destroying it. They're going back to fucking pre-Magna Carta days, bro. That's where we're at right now. I mean, this is an all-out onslaught on domestic law in this country. We've already made a mockery of international law. I mean, that shit, that goes back a long way, back even before the Bush regime, right? And they fucking really put the nail in the coffin. But this is now domestically. Law, what law? We do what we want. We arrest you, we detain you, we deport you. Maybe we put your name in the computer, maybe we don't. Maybe your family knows where you are, maybe they don't. Maybe your lawyer does, maybe he doesn't. That's where we're at now. That's where we're at now. This is completely and utterly unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. Look at this in Rolling Stone. What is alarming today is the emerging pattern of shadowy deportations of people who have not had access to a court or any meaningful form of due process. Removals that bear the hallmarks of forced disappearances under international law. And they write, ICE is deporting people to Africa on nearly untrackable military flights. At least one of the flights dumped people in a prison camp in Ghana, a country where they had no ties. This is what we're talking about, guys. I mean, they wanted to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia to Libya. Libya is literally a failed state with open slave markets. And you want to send him there to ruin his life and he might wind up a fucking slave? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Well, now we know. This is what they're doing. Untrackable military flights, dumping people wherever the fuck we want all over the world. This is criminal. This is why I keep telling you it's got to be a litmus test on the Democratic side. You have to say that Kristi Noem needs to be arrested. She has to be arrested. Stephen Miller has to be arrested. Donald Trump has to be arrested. These people need to be charged. They need to be held accountable. We need new Nuremberg tribunals, new Nuremberg laws. Like, we have to do it, or else the law is just a fucking joke. There are no checks and balances.
Yeah. Lock them up in the gulag.
If you thought Trump was only going after criminal immigrants, I have a bridge to sell you. President Trump ruined the weekend of a lot of highly skilled workers and immigration attorneys with a Friday announcement that all H-1B visa applicants would now have to pay a whopping $100,000 non-refundable fee to have their applications processed. Now, if this sounds like an insane thing that doesn't seem like the president has the power to do, well, you're correct. This fee wasn't created by statute, it wasn't the subject of any agency rulemaking, it was just dropped into a brief, vaguely worded executive order that would take effect in less than 48 hours. And that's not how this works. And of course, chaos ensued. People canceled trips, people rushed home to the US from abroad. It was an absolute mess. And because this thing was so poorly worded and not thought out, many legal experts interpreted the vague language of the executive order to mean that H-1B visa holders who were currently traveling abroad would have to pay the $100,000 fee just to re-enter the United States. Tech companies like Amazon and Microsoft issued memos to their employees urging H-1B visa holders not to travel abroad and to return immediately if they were abroad. So people booked expensive last-minute flights and deboarded other expensive international flights. India's Ministry of External Affairs warned of humanitarian consequences and, quote, disruption caused for families. India's leaders encouraged its government offices to do whatever they could to help Indian H-1B visa holders to return to the United States within 24 hours. There was so much chaos that the administration had to issue another hastily written memo, basically in the form of a press release, on Saturday clarifying that this only applies to prospective applicants. But the administration doubled down on the six-figure fee, did not revise the language of the executive order, and all despite the fact that it will make it difficult, if not impossible, for many qualified workers to obtain these visas and could create substantial gaps in U.S. industries, especially in the tech industry, leading to yet more inflation. President Trump's executive order, titled Restriction on Entry of Certain Non-Immigrant Workers, declared that, quote, the entry into the United States of aliens as non-immigrants to perform services in a specialty occupation under H-1B is restricted except for those aliens whose petitions are accompanied or supplemented by a payment of $100,000. The effective date of this proclamation shall be 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on September 21st, 2025. So in brief, anyone who wants their H-1B visa processed now has to cough up $100,000 effective immediately. The administration justified the massive fee by arguing that, quote, the large-scale replacement of American workers through systemic abuse of the program has undermined both our economic and national security.
They took our jobs!
President Trump claimed that he had authority to unilaterally create this fee under sections 1185F and 1182A of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Those were the sections used for the so-called Muslim ban. That is extremely legally questionable, but more on that later. The executive order also contained a massive, vaguely worded loophole stating, quote, this section shall not apply to any individual alien, all aliens working for a company, or all aliens working in an industry if the Secretary of Homeland Security determines, in the Secretary's discretion, that the hiring of such aliens to be employed as H-1B specialty occupation workers is in the national interest and does not pose a threat to the security or welfare of the United States. So according to the text of the executive order, Kristi Noem can waive that $100,000 fee pretty much whenever she wants, even for entire industries, if she so chooses, for any reason or no reason at all. And it looks like she...
What a shit show. We're going to move on to the Electronic Intifada, where we'll get Gaza updates from the week and John Elmer's resistance report.
Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, September 25th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, John Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamarat Nassar. It's day 720 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll be joined by writer, poet, journalist, and genocide survivor Ahmed Abu Artema to talk about how and why he left Gaza and what he witnessed. Later on in the program, John will bring us the latest resistance news from Gaza, along with a report on the Israeli military's use of unmanned, remotely operated armored vehicles as bombs. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israel has killed at least 357 Palestinians and injured at least 1,500 between September 17th and September 24th, according to official records from the Ministry of Health in Gaza. Most of the attacks are still concentrated in Gaza City, where Israel has been bombing high-rise residential towers, hospitals, refugee camps, and tent shelters for weeks as its ground forces advance. Journalist Abed Dawas took this foot.
All right. You do you, Pillow. Be kind to yourself, comrade.
Footage after an airstrike on the Tal al-Hawa neighborhood of Gaza City on September 22nd. Reporter Mohammed Kita recorded this clip of an Israeli tank on a road in Gaza City on Tuesday. After a few moments of filming, the tank's gun rotates toward the reporter.
يتوغل في حي النصر حركة هذا حركة
والله بالضبط زنانة شباب خلاص كل كافيون عملت غير الشيخ ولا خلاص
كما تشاهدون هذا ريبوت ولا دبابة؟ ريبوت. لا دبابة إسرائيلية الآن. هذه دبابة.
As John will report on later, Israel continues to use remote-controlled vehicles to destroy entire residential buildings across the city. Photojournalist Ahmed al-Sawafiri recorded such an attack on September 20th. The UN Human Rights Office says that between September 19th and 20th, there were at least 18 recorded attacks on residential buildings in Gaza City, with dozens killed and more remaining buried under the rubble. One of the deadliest attacks, the Human Rights Office says, was a strike on September 20th on 3 inhabited residential buildings on a single block in the Sabra neighborhood in southern Gaza City. The Israeli attack killed at least 20 members of the Dagmash family, including 12 children, with dozens reported missing under the rubble. This came just a day after another residential building housing other members of the Dagmash family in the same area had been struck, killing 8 family members, including at least 4 girls. Faris Afanna, the director of emergency and medical services in Gaza, told reporter Mohammed Abu Salama that ambulance and rescue crews worked nonstop to recover bodies from under the rubble after the September 20th attacks. Afanna said that emergency workers, quote, continue to provide this service despite the danger. The next day, relatives searched local morgues for the remains of their loved ones, while dozens more remained trapped under the concrete. Journalist Syed Hezbollah filmed an injured young man breaking down after losing his uncle, his cousins, and all of his relatives in the attack. Sitting on the bed of a truck loaded with bodies of his relatives wrapped in blankets, he says, quote, "Look what they did to us, so that the world will see what they're doing to us. Look, martyrs, martyrs." Israel continued to attack the beach refugee camp in western Gaza City this week. Reporter Hussein Kersoa filmed a distraught father searching for his children buried under the rubble on September 23rd after an airstrike on homes in the camp. He says, quote, "I can't hear you, children," calling over and over again for Salma and Saad. Shouting through tears and pounding on rubble with a hammer, he calls out to Saad, saying, "Didn't I tell you to take care of your sister? Didn't I tell you to take care of your sister, my son?" before collapsing in agony.
بنسمعكم يابا سمعكم يابا سمع 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 يابا سعيد 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 يابا 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 سعيد سعيد يابا سعيد مش قلت لك انك عقدك مش قلت لك انك على صوتك مش قلت لك انك عقدك مش قلت لك انك عقدك يابا.
On Wednesday, September 24th, Israel bombed a residential building where mutual aid workers with the Samir Project organize food for distribution in northern Gaza.
That's one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen, dude. There's no gore. There's no bodies. Just a distraught father. Fuck.
A fire quickly spread inside the building. You can hear children screaming as they're being pulled out by people nearby. Rescue workers say that they searched for people buried in the rubble and retrieved a number of bodies.
هواية ونحن كنا قاعدين بالضبط الطرود هاي الهواية في ناس
Welcome to the stream, Web Purified.
في ضربات ضرب العمارة.
The Samir Project stated, quote, "As food packages were being organized for distribution, the occupation bombed a residential building, leveling the area around where our team was working. Nearly 500,000 people remain in the north of Gaza, whether because they refuse to leave their land or because they are unable to find costly transport south. Thousands and thousands of families still need food, still need water, still need our help, as they are being bombed without mercy." And on Tuesday, Civil Defense spokesperson Mahmoud Basal captured this wrenching moment when a small boy carried the body of his 4-year-old cousin, Zain, wrapped in a shroud to a cemetery. Basal says that Zain was killed in an airstrike that claimed the lives of 33 people. The boy, accompanied by his father, kisses the shroud and says, "May God have mercy on you, my beloved Zain. You and I used to play together, my darling Zayn. We used to play together every day. Send my greetings to your sister and to your father and siblings. The UN Human Rights Office said that these relentless attacks
all the grief of a lifetime on the shoulders of children, bro.
Quote, in addition to the steady advance of the Israeli ground forces toward western Gaza City, demolishing residential buildings under its control on the way, appear to have resulted in renewed waves of mass forced displacement to the south of Gaza, where there is no space, infrastructure, or basic necessities to support the influx of internally displaced persons, and where the Israeli military continues to strike shelters, the UN said. Israel's sharp increase in the number of civilians being slaughtered in Gaza City, the UN Human Rights Office added, seem intended to inflict terror on the Palestinian population of Gaza City, forcing tens of thousands to flee. Between September 17th and September 20th, nearly 82,000 Palestinians were displaced from northern to southern Gaza. Photojournalist Moaz Hosni filmed families crammed onto trucks, as he says, quote, united not by a road or a destination, but by the inability to afford the journey, like a temporary arc of collective survival. On September 20th, our contributor Assam An-Nabih, the spokesperson for the Gaza municipality, wrote on social media that, quote, my mind cannot digest the idea of losing Gaza. My brain is incapable of processing the meaning of such a loss. I can't even understand the word itself. I can't engage with it, and I can't place it within any logical context. I might be able to understand and process the loss of anything else, to frame it in a way that time could help me cope with. But losing Gaza? No way. There's no logic in it. None at all. Israel continues to bomb hospitals and the areas surrounding them. On September 22nd, the Israeli army struck the Palestinian Medical Relief Society's building in Gaza City, sending an enormous plume of smoke into the sky. Hassan Al-Mogain captured the bombing on video. Medical Aid for Palestinians, MAP, a British charity that works with the Palestinian Medical Relief Society, stated, quote, on September 22nd, an Israeli military airstrike destroyed Al-Samar Clinic, which had been providing healthcare services since 2006. The clinic has been reduced to rubble and services shut down. The clinic was a cornerstone of community health and provided vital primary health care, mental health support, cancer care, blood donation, physiotherapy, and women's services, MAP stated. 45 staff members, including cardiologists and nutritionists, have lost their place of work, and their patients have been left without care. Staff, quote, were given just 10 minutes to evacuate before the clinic was struck. The attack has left the clinic completely destroyed and unusable, including its laboratories and its assistive devices center. In the past 3 weeks alone, the Medical Relief Society reports that 3 of their clinics across Gaza have been targeted in Israeli military attacks. 2 have been completely destroyed, and 1 clinic has been partially damaged. The Ministry of Health in Gaza reported also on September 22nd that after bombing Al-Rantisi Pediatric Hospital last week, it is now completely out of service due to the Israeli army continuing to target the hospital's surroundings. Along with the only children's hospital, the last remaining clinic providing ophthalmological services in Gaza is also closed, the ministry said, as there are no safe roads to either facilities that will allow patients to reach them. Australian doctor Nada Abu Al-Rub, who is working at various Gaza hospitals, described the state of the accelerating medical catastrophe for patients and doctors, especially as mass casualty events are continuous. She says that in addition to the slaughter by airstrikes and tanks, every few hours children arrive at the hospitals malnourished and suffering from infections, leading to cardiac arrests.
We have Mohammed Hamdan here. We lost his sister yesterday, Farah Hamdan. And since it was day 1 for me, and since I
This is the same doctor who performed an emergency C-section on a beheaded woman. The baby's mother's head was blown off in an explosion. And that was day 1 or 2 for this Australian doctor.
We met a lot of other kids who had the same problem. So they all arrived malnourished. Mohammed is better today. He could at least walk. Yesterday, we were so busy looking after him. There was no time to take pictures and photos and videos in the middle of disaster. His legs couldn't hold him because how malnourished he is. Mohammed? 10. He's 10 years old, but he definitely looks younger than 10 years old. His sister was 15. She looked 10 or 7 even. On top of the malnourishment, most of the people here are now intoxicated by the dirty water. So the water here is not good for human use. Even as doctors now, we all have gastritis. And with the poor kids, they can't tolerate as much as we do. On top of their malnutrition, once they have diarrhea, they all run into severe hypokalemia. So we're now watching kids that are having a cardiac arrest. Every few hours, we have a kid with a cardiac arrest. Now,
what is gastritis? Gastritis? It's an inflammation of the stomach lining. It can be caused by drinking too much alcohol, certain medicines, or smoking. Some diseases and other health issues can cause gastritis. Symptoms may include stomach pain, belching, nausea, vomiting, abdominal bleeding, feeling full, and blood in vomit or stool. Gastritis can be serious. Acute gastritis, sudden onset, may last days to a few weeks. Chronic can persist for months or even years if untreated. Oh God.
Dr. Nada Abu al-Rub. And doctors are still being targeted. On September 20th, Israel bombed the home of Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, the director of Al-Shifa Hospital, who was abducted by Israeli forces in November 2023 and detained and tortured for 7 months. He says he left his home in the beach refugee camp to go to work at Al-Shifa, and the bodies of 6 of his relatives arrived while he was on duty. Reporter Nahed Hajjaj filmed Dr. Abu Salmiya mourning over the bodies of his brother, 2 nephews, his nephew's wife, and 2 of their children. Turning quickly to the occupied West Bank, Israeli settlers backed by Israeli soldiers shot and killed 20-year-old Saeed Murad Nassan on Tuesday in the village of Al-Mughayr near Ramallah. On Wednesday, Israeli settlers then attacked the funeral of the young man, firing live ammunition at the mourners, Wafa news agency reported. Meanwhile, Israel closed the Allenby Bridge crossing between the West Bank and Jordan indefinitely, just 3 days after reopening it following a shooting by a Jordanian national that killed 2 Israeli soldiers. The crossing in the Jordan Valley, known as Karama on the Palestinian side, is the only crossing point between Jordan and the West Bank. Most of the West Bank's 3.3 million residents depend on the bridge for travel abroad. This week, our contributor Buthaina Hamdan, who is based in Ramallah, wrote in her feature article that as the genocide continues in Gaza, quote, "We are living under a slow genocide in the West Bank, with Israel's annexation of more land, daily killings at the hands of settlers and soldiers, and constant financial strain." We've published many features on the electronic intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Brown-Eyed Girl, Men Playing Chess Massacred on My Street by Ahmed Abu Shawish, writing from Gaza. Ahmed writes about an initiative for children that he and his family started in 2024 where they used their solar panels to power a screen in the backyard of their house and display cartoons for the displaced neighboring children. Eventually, with some funding, Ahmed says that his family expanded their activities to include psychological support for the children through art and play therapy. One of those children, Ahmed says, was a 5-year-old girl named Siham Al-Ashi. Quote, "Soso was the pet name I had given her as she would always run toward me, her arms wide open, ready to fold me into a hug. On November 10th, 2024, at around 1:35 p.m., I stepped outside my home. Children were completely absorbed in their games, and Soso was there, hopping between chalked squares. A few meters away, Abu Hadi, Abu Nahed, and Abu Ahmed huddled around the chessboard. Come and see how I'm finally going to beat Abu Ahmed, Abu Hadi called me, with a voice full of playful confidence. I smiled and was genuinely curious, as he had never won a single game before. But something made me hesitate, some kind of a providence. For the first time, I didn't join them and went back inside. I sat down, scrolling through my phone for a few minutes. My curiosity tugged at me more to see if Abu Hadi would really manage to defeat Abu Ahmed. I got up at 1:45 p.m. and opened the front door. I headed toward the garden door to open it and go out to the by street. But I felt as if everything collapsed. An explosion tore through the street and hurled me back. A storm of fragments and dust engulfed me, and my eardrums felt as if they had been perforated by the piercing sound. Chunks of flesh clung to my face and shirt. Blood spattered across our front door. I froze. My arms were trembling, my legs numb. I couldn't move for a moment. The world went silent, except for the ringing in my ears and the heaviness crushing my chest. With faltering steps, I tried to open the garden door, but it didn't budge as it had been twisted and shattered by the blast. I sprinted back inside the house, turned to the door facing the main street, then stepped outside and headed toward the by street where we used to gather every day. The scene was ineffable, horrifying beyond anything words could describe. 4 or 5 bodies lay motionless on the ground right in front of our house. I couldn't move forward, my knees locked, my voice cracked. Oh God, was all I could cry out. Dust was all around. I took a few more steps, And that's when I saw a little girl lying on the ground with part of her brain exposed from her head. She was Soso. I bent down and checked her chest, feeling for her heartbeat with shaky hands. She was still breathing, her pulse faint. Some people screamed around me, "Leave her, cover the body." I couldn't. All I was thinking about was saving Soso. I picked her up in my arms and hurried a few steps toward the main street, desperate to find any transportation to take her to the hospital. Just then, two people with a motorcycle stopped, took Soso, and rushed her to Al Auda Hospital in Nuseirat. I returned to the site of the incident. The dust had settled, and I saw the full picture of the street. It transformed into something I still cannot name. Beheaded and torn bodies were scattered around. I couldn't recognize a single face, not even one. Then I saw a body, wearing a navy blue t-shirt I knew very well. It was mine. Only then did I realize it was my close friend Hisham's body. He had been killed alongside Abu Hadi and Abu Ahmed. Soso went into clinical death and passed away 2 days later on November 12th. The smell of death in Gaza became familiar, almost routine. The street that was once full of life now turned into a ghost street. That airstrike didn't kill me, but it destroyed something inside. It wiped out all the vibes that filled the place. From that moment on, I started avoiding walking through that road, not out of fear, but because I don't want to relive that terrible scene again. It is a mental wound that I will carry for the rest of my life. A few moments separated me from death, but maybe God chose me to live and tell the story of my friends and neighbors. Those are excerpts from Brown-Eyed Girl, Men Playing Chess Massacred on My Street by Ahmad Abu Shawish, a journalist and activist in Gaza, on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Gaza and around the world. Today, we'll focus on a general strike by workers and union members across Italy on Monday, who shut down the country to demand an end to Israel's genocide. The Associated Press stated that Italy's grassroots unions, which represent hundreds of thousands of people ranging from school teachers to metal workers, called for a 24-hour general strike in both public and private sectors, including public transportation, trains, schools, and ports. Roads and highways were also shut down. 10,000 people blocked the main highway between Florence and Bologna alone. This was filmed by the Italian-Palestinian youth organization Giovani Palestinesi d'Italia. The transit of goods was slowed or partially blocked by workers' sit-ins and rallies in Italy's main ports of Genova and Livorno. More than 20,000 people gathered in front of Rome's central station to protest the genocide. Unions and student organizations denounced, quote, the inertia of the Italian and EU governments, the AP reported. Walter Montagnoli, the national secretary of the CUB union, said at the protest in Milan, quote, if we don't block what Israel is doing, if we don't block trade, the distribution of weapons, and everything else with Israel, we will not ever achieve anything. The Italian news site Genova 24 compiled clips of some of the protests. Students declared, we are all anti-Zionists, and marched in the streets of Genova.
Forte, forte! Siamo tutti antizionisti! Forte! Siamo tutti antizionisti! Ancora, coro! Siamo
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barros-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you for that. As usual, very difficult for us to get through, very emotional, and particularly so for me personally, but I know that it is for all of us.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're back. I know it's been a really hard couple of weeks for you and your family, and people, our listeners and viewers and readers have been sending so many notes of support and love to you and your family, Ali, on the passing of your mother.
Yes.
Yeah, his mother passed away recently, like in the last 10 days or so.
And I hope his article, for those who read Dutch, it's an extraordinary article. You can get a pretty decent machine translation. It holds up well. There it is in De Correspondant. Probably searching De Correspondant and Ahmed Abu Tema is probably the easiest way to find it if you're not a Dutch speaker. And I hope and I believe it will be published in other languages soon. It's really an extraordinary account, and I think seeing and hearing Ahmed tell us some of that and more, there's a lot that he said in this discussion that is not in the article that I heard for the first time. And
Thanks for that. Let's bring John on. Hi, John. Hey.
Hey. Very moving show.
Yeah, it's a tough one today.
Yeah. And it's great to see you, Ali, and all our love to your family, to your father, and to Ahmed's family as well. And happy birthday, Rafat.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Oh, what a week. John, a lot has happened. There was a strike yesterday in Rashash that is also called Eilat by Yemeni armed forces. A lot to talk about this week. Why don't you just take it away?
All right, let's do it. So you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am John Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 720 of Israel's genocide and day 10 of the Second Battle of Gaza City. Let's take a look at the maps here because the Battle of Gaza City involves the ethnic cleansing of the city. These are the maps I've been showing you over the last few weeks by the International Organization of Migration. You're looking at a map on the screen here with dozens of arrows pointing from neighborhoods in Gaza City down into the south, into the Mawasi area, which is already overcrowded, and into the middle camps area in Dar al-Bala, which is also overcrowded and there's no room for people. The number we see on the screen here from the International Organization of Migration is that 328,000 people had left. That was as of Monday of this week. They have updated this number to 388,000 as of this morning. And that number greatly differs from the number that the Israeli military said. On Wednesday, Army Radio reported that the Southern Command estimates 700,000 people have left Gaza City so far, which they said is a significant number and allows them freedom of movement and maneuvering in Gaza City. According to their estimates, 200,000 to 300,000 people will remain in Gaza City. That's the number that the IDF anticipates. The Operation Gideon's Chariots Part 2, the attack on Gaza City, began last Monday. Between Monday and Thursday, the first 3.5 days of this operation, the Israelis boasted about 1,200 airstrikes, just airstrikes, as I always say. That does not include all the other forms of munitions. 170 airstrikes in the past 24 hours. So a operational tempo to and massacres of people fleeing. Massacres in the camps that Nora covered in the news report, which I highly recommend people check out for the humanitarian context. A devastating situation unfolding in Gaza City right now, all over Palestine, all over Gaza, because of the movement of people and the lack of resources that those people have to move, debilitating lack of fuel. People have lost all their belongings. There's no currency in Gaza. The banks have been long destroyed, so there's no currency for people to travel. Costs thousands of dollars to travel to get a new tent set up in an area where there's not enough room for people. So this is the migration out of Gaza City. We're going to start in the south this week, though. Check out this first map that you're familiar with from southern Gaza. There was an operation this week in Rafah, right pretty much where the Rafah is on that map there, located right above the Philadelphia corridor, which divides Egypt and Gaza. There was an operation that targeted well, first of all, let me just say about Rafah. We know this because we've been following it for 2 years. We know that the Israeli military said that the Rafah brigade was defeated in August of 2024. In March of this year, when Israel reneged on the ceasefire by carrying out a massacre in the middle of the night of more than 400 people, half of them children who were at home asleep in their beds during a ceasefire that was guaranteed by international brokers, including the United States, ostensibly the most powerful country in the world. These kids were massacred in their beds and the war resumed. The ceasefire and prisoner exchange ended. At that time, the IDF went back into Rafah and said at the time that the goal of the Golani Brigade in Rafah was to defeat the Rafah Brigade. So 9 months later, still trying to defeat the Rafah Brigade, and we saw that at the early stages of Gideon's Chariots Part 1. Let's take a look at number 2 because you can see the outcome of this operation. There was 4 operations in a single day in Rafah late last week. The final one left 7 IDF casualties, 4 killed, and at least 1 others seriously wounded. You're looking at an excavator that is usually used to drop Palestinian homes. Here holding up the destroyed IDF Humvee, American IDF Humvee, as all of Israel's tools for the most part are. This happened just above the Philadelphia corridor, as I said. And once this operation happened, the IDF admitted that that was the 4th engagement of the day. They had been targeted 3 other times in Rafah on that day of the operation alone. And that operation was at 9:30 a.m. So before 9:30 a.m., up to 9:30 a.m., 4 resistance operations in Rafah targeting these units forced the IDF spokesperson to sort of sheepishly say there is underground infrastructure that remains in the area that has not been neutralized. The fighters.
Womp womp. Early bird gets the worm, I guess. All before 9 a.m.
Were able to navigate through the ethnically cleansed, completely destroyed territory in Rafah to get all the way to the south of Rafah and carry out a qualitative operation, killing 4 soldiers. You can look at the number 3 has the same, that's the Jeep, the Humvee before. So Channel 12 tried to do an investigation to understand what happened. They did it with the IDF, and they had an IDF source who said that he had watched over and over the drone footage trying to understand how the fighters were able to plant the explosives on this route. Obviously, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, again, by Qassam and the resistance factions are dialed in on this one. And the report from Channel 12 from the IDF soldier who had been staring at the drone images was that the Palestinian fighters were able to cloak themselves and the weapon in a way that the drone didn't pick up. Now, we have seen these movements by Qassam shrouding themselves and moving across the battlefield before, so this is an example of that in Rafah. But let's move up to Gaza City, where the main battle is. This is the map that you're familiar with. Right now, the Israelis are pushing on Tel El-Hawa in the southwest of Gaza City. Zaytun was a month ago's operation, destroying Zaytun, and then Gideon's Chariots Part 1 flattened Shujaiya, Tufa, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Jabalia Camp, which is north of Jabalia City that you see there. And now the Israeli military has 3 divisions in Gaza City. One division, the 162, is pushing in from the east across Shujaiya into Gaza City. The 98th Division from the north pushing down south on the western side of Jabalia into the Shati refugee camp, where the Israeli military has not operated since February of 2024, the first few months of the war. That's the same with Gaza City. Israel said they had conquered Gaza City, like all other places that they say they conquered and did not, is what the story is for Gaza City. Because we can remember back at late 2023 that Israel was using their armored vehicles to put Star of Davids in the main square in Gaza City. They hung a menorah up during the Christmas and the holidays, just as a thumb in the eye of Palestinians in Gaza City. They took photos in the Palestinian Legislative Council. They sacked Shifa Hospital. All of these things we remember from the first battle of Gaza City. So let's take a look at the first operation. The Israelis went into Tel El-Hawa and were immediately hit. We see fighters, again, with eyes on 2 Merkava tanks. We see the fighter here with what looks like a brand new Yassin, newly lathed Yassin, it looks like, warhead here. And this is going to be an elevated Yassin 105 strike. You can see a dead hit on the turret. The Israeli military, before this video came out, had admitted that the commander of this tank, a company commander in the 7th Armored Brigade, 77th Battalion, had been killed in this operation. His soldiers were shown the next day saluting their commander who was killed, all with their backs to the camera, because at this point in the genocide, the Israeli military knows that you can't show your faces while committing genocide. So while saluting their commander, they all had their faces hidden and were looking away as if they had turned their backs on him. Not sure that was their intention, but that's what happens when you are committing a genocide and the world is trying to bring justice for that. There was also a major operation in Sheikh Radwan 2 days ago, where fighters were identified at a few meters away from an Israeli position in a close-range, close-quarters battle, face-to-face firefight, during which time IDF platoon commander, who was leading the forces, was seriously wounded in that operation. A sniper operation today killed an Israeli soldier. So the territorial battalions that we've been talking about all throughout the war are immediately present. They were immediately present in Zaytun when that operation started. They're immediately present in Sheikh Radwan when that operation started. The same, the Shati camp, Jabalia. You're going to see operations from Jabalia later on in the show. So Qassam, as Israel pushed into the center of Gaza City this week, put up a warning to the Israelis, number 4C here. It's the POW warning them about their POW, saying that as you were previously warned, saying to the Israelis, the more you expand the scope of your criminal operations in the city of Gaza, the greater the danger is to your prisoners. They also released a poster this week that showed the 48 captives that are still in Gaza, the 20 living ones, all soldiers, and showed their faces on the posters. And underneath each one, it said Ron Arad 1, Ron Arad 2, and so on. And Ron Arad was a Israeli fighter pilot, a weapons officer on a fighter jet, who in 1986 was on a mission in dropping bombs on Lebanon. One of those bombs failed to detonate as it dropped, and it blew the plane up. And the pilot was rescued by the Israelis, but Ron Arad, the weapons officer, disappeared, and his body was never found, and the place where his body is buried was never found. And this was a major story in Israel, dating back to 1986, that everyone in Israel knows. So when you write a poster that says Ron Arad number 1, Ron Arad number 2, and so on, you're saying that the fate of these captives will follow the same fate as Ron Arad. But as we know, Netanyahu does not care about the POWs, but it's interesting to see these psychological operations that Qassam has waged at the beginning of this war. You can see there the neighborhood of Tel El-Hawa there and Ramal in central Gaza City. The core, the real downtown core of Gaza City is what we are talking about. So number 5 shows the ethnic cleansing of Gaza City. A lot of people probably saw footage of how packed the waterfront area was. In Gaza City, tents all along the water, all along the pier there in the harbor, they're packed with people. And one of the primary tools that Israel used, besides their aerial massacres, besides their helicopter gunship massacres, naval and artillery shelling, suicide drones, burning people alive in their tents with grenades dropped from quadcopters. But the real principal one that we've seen in Gaza City particularly is the use of these M113 armored personnel carriers that are basically tank bombs, tracked vehicles, armored vehicles, stuffed with explosives, many more explosives than fit into the largest Israeli bomb that they've been setting off in these urban areas to try to scare the population, to destroy large numbers of housing blocks at one time. And so, followers of this war will know that we've been tracking these M113s all through the war since we first saw them in Khan Yunis just a few months into the war in early 2024. But Gideon's Chariots Part 1 really saw a major upscaling of the use of these tank bombs, these APC bombs. The Palestinians call them robot bombs. And Gideon's Chariots Part 2 as even more so. And this week was the first time that Israel's military censor acknowledged these, and it was acknowledged for the first time through Army radio. We'll talk more about that coming up. Let's take a look at what one of those bombs looked like. You saw one from Nora today, but this one in Jabalia camp from a few days ago. The military can send them into those alleyways that they're too afraid to go in with their troops, and that they can carry, these armored vehicles can carry several times the tonnage of the heaviest Israeli bomb. Just some examples. Civil Defense on September 3rd said that Israeli forces had detonated more than 100 of these over the previous week. The Euromed tracking of this, field officer tracked 15 of these in a day, are some of these numbers. Army radio talks about 20 of them in a few hours. So they're very heavily using these weapons. And you can see the massive impact about that. Army radio said that these tank bombs are catching quite a bit of attention in Gaza, as they would. Many tons of explosives going off. It creates a massive plume that you can see all over Gaza. They reported that you can hear it shaking inside Israel as well. And Army radio pointed out straight up that the scale of these attacks has accelerated the population evacuation from Gaza City. So they're using these terror bombings to get people out of Gaza City. You can see another one, number 7. You can see it from the soldiers' perspective here, because the soldiers know it's coming, so they can record these videos. And you can see here, there's a twin one. Nora showed one today as well. That was a twin one. They set them off at the same time. This footage is from the Genocide Tracker on Twitter. Genocide Tracker is a Twitter account that began in 2024, early in the war, that scans Israeli social media accounts related to their Gaza deployments, and it creates profiles for each of these soldiers, their names, their military units for the war crimes trial. So shout out to Tracking Genocide. We're going to use a few of their videos in this show today. But I want to show you the vehicle itself. I pulled this video from Rafael. This is from the Israeli Defense Company, and this is them showing this vehicle off. They have 5,000 of them that were given to them by the Americans. These are outdated armored personnel carriers that would get shredded on the battlefield fighting Qassam, but they're advertising these as up armored. And you can see in the back, they can hold up to a dozen. Some versions of them have 15 soldiers in the back, but you can see that space in the back in the cabin can be completely, all the chairs, all the seats can be moved out of them, and Israel can put several different ways of putting explosives inside them. We'll see them as the show goes on, but they have form-fit crates that go into the back that they can then roll on, roll off. For those, they also use bags. They just fill up bags that are hung through the hatches to fill up that cabin. With, like I said, the cabin can carry 10 tons, its combat weight of 10 tons. And a Mark 84 2,000-pound bomb is the largest bomb in the Israeli arsenal. So you're talking many times, several times over the heaviest bomb, and it's set inside these armored vehicles. So they pack a significant punch. So Army radio this week said that they are, quote, breaking the silence on the M113s on Sunday. The system, they said that the entire city of Gaza is talking about, no doubt the city of Gaza is talking about it, because previously these were mostly used in already ethnically cleansed areas. They're used because they're scared to fight the resistance in the alleys, so they send these vehicles in to blow up entire buildings. The Israeli justification is that it trips booby-trapped buildings, but of course this is far more than tripping booby traps. The Israeli Army radio said, in recent days, the system has been operated in the Gaza Strip on a completely industrial scale, dozens of times a day, mainly at night. It has so far destroyed thousands of buildings in the Gaza Strip in general, and in Gaza City in particular, and is estimated to have neutralized thousands of explosives. This system, a senior officer said, this system has become the most dramatic combat means we use in Gaza. The directive of the Southern Command, that's the IDF regional command for Gaza, said this system must be operational 100% of the time for any mission. The IDF has considered submitting the system, these M113 robot bombs, as a candidate for the Israel Security Award. So they're super proud of this, as they would be. A senior IDF officer told Army Radio, imagine what 100 such robotic APCs can do, entering the train before our forces, opening the way for it. This is the future battlefield, and we will be the first in the world to do it. So these guys are super proud of their terror bombings, of their tanks that their big brother, the United States, gave them as hand-me-downs for free. According to the military balance, Israelis have 5,000 of these, and last year they tried to sell these vehicles on to other countries, and that's what you're seeing in this Rafael video that I found, because this is the Israelis saying, we can take these old, outdated armored personnel carriers and we can up-armor them, we can make them safer for you and sell them to Ukraine or whatever. But obviously, in the years since then, they've decided that it's much better off to just use these as terror bombings and use them as a massive tracked vehicle bomb. So let's take a look. I went through the Resistance Report archives, and I found the times we've seen them. This is a good look from Nusrat in 2024. You can see the system, the unmanned system on the top, and you can see on the front there, that has an automatic 50 cal machine gun. So there's multiple of these systems that they use. They also use them to hump explosives. So they, back in the era when Israel was using anti-tank mines to blow up houses, these would shuttle the anti-tank mines in. And again, the Army radio story brags about these. They think this is the future of warfare too. Lethal robot APCs equipped with a firing system. Such a system can roam freely through the alleys of the Gaza Strip, identifying terrorists and firing at them. This kind of mobile see and shoot position at the start of the war, the first days of the maneuver, the IDF deployed a few such lethal robot APCs. So this is obviously what we're seeing right now from the resistance. The resistance caught this before anyone else had seen this, because they were in areas that had been ethnically cleansed. And of course, there is a history of unmanned vehicles. Israel uses unmanned D9 armored bulldozers to destroy houses as well. And these vehicles that you're looking at right there, the M113, has a history itself in Gaza. Two of them were blown up in 2004 and killed everyone on board of both of them. And the Israelis blamed Adnan al-Ghul for the bombs that blew those up, and he was assassinated shortly after that. And the beginning of the 2014 war in Shujaiya, the Israelis sent one of these into Shujaiya, and it was destroyed as soon as it touched the ground. All soldiers inside killed, and one taken captive. And of course, we also saw them. I showed you a bunch of videos from Lebanon throughout the war, where we saw them being used by the Israelis behind the lines, like in northern Israel. But because the long-range anti-tank guided missile systems that Hezbollah had, they were sailing their missile system. The Almas was chasing down these behind the front lines, which is what they're used for. We also saw them captured on October 7th, because Israel uses them to shuttle, like a battlefield bus or a battlefield shuttle is what they're used for. We can look at the next one. This was in Khan Yunis. This was actually the first time we ever saw them. This is in early February 2024, and fighters saw them here. There you can see the one from the back. And the massive explosions on those definitely suggest they are holding explosives, possibly not the same explosive that they're using right now, but maybe this is an anti-tank mine era. There's a second one we're going to see get hit by the resistance. And this raised eyebrows at the time when we saw this, because we weren't sure what these outdated vehicles were doing on the battlefield. Again, you can see that one pretty clearly loaded with explosives from that blast. These are aluminum alloy vehicles. They don't have the strength of regular armored personnel carriers. Let's look at the one from Jenin, number 11. Or sorry, this is from Rafah, Al Janaina neighborhood in Rafah, and they caught one. Qassam caught one. They probably just guessing here, but they probably intercepted the signal that it drives on, just like they intercept the signal that the drones fly on in order to drop them. And there you can see, so they're loaded. They have these explosives loaded into bags that are dumped. You can see it at the back there. Massive bag fills the whole cabin. And this fighter is telling. You can see there, yeah. You can see it there. This fighter is saying, "They fight us with remotely operated vehicles full of explosives." This is a paraphrase, but we tell you, fight.
Bro, they caught one. That's crazy, dude.
See it back there, massive bag fills the whole cabin. And this fighter is telling, you can see there, yeah, perfect. You can see it there. This fighter is saying, "They fight us with remotely operated vehicles full of explosives." This is a paraphrase. But we tell you, fight us face to face. Fight us with your soldiers. We'll drown you in the sands of Gaza, he says as he's shaking his pliers that he's uncutting them. "We will dismantle your vehicles of explosives. Your soldiers are too afraid to fight us." So you can see there, after we saw from the Raphael demo of the size of the vehicle, now you can see how much explosives are put into them. Not sure that anyone would recommend doing what this fighter is doing, but he did it, and he disabled it, and presumably they're able to then use those explosives. So that was in Rafah in August.
Plenty of explosives for a return to sender operation.
And I think, did we see one more? 13. Yeah, one more in Rafah here. You can see this is from above. You can see that this is probably one humping supplies to soldiers, because watch, when the impact is significantly less than when they're loaded with ammunition, with explosives of whatever kind. But the resistance has been all over these. Israel military censor broke down this week and said, "Oh, we have this new innovation," but the resistance has been showing this. Here's a hand-delivered one we're watching. Again, don't think that these aren't recommended methods considering the amount of explosives in there, but he's got an extra long fuse, and you can see that he clearly gets back home safe to his base before before his guerrilla action device detonates that vehicle. So the resistance has been all over this. This is again in Rafah in the summer. I've lost what number I'm on tomorrow. 13, yeah. Number 13, this is in Jabalia. You can see this. This is during the general's plan to ethnically cleanse the north. You can see the resistance has spotted it and hit it with a Yasin, and you can see that explosion looks very similar to the ones we watched and the ones Nora showed. So the resistance intercepting that one. So this was during the general's plan, and 2 days before Dr. Hussam Abu Safia was captured from Kamal Adwan Hospital, he wrote that on Tuesday, December 24th, yesterday for the first time, robots advanced near the hospital, he said, posing a significant danger due to their proximity. They were very close, and they detonated explosives. As a result, the partitions and the doors of the hospital were destroyed. The destruction was horrific. The hospital departments, 20 people were injured, including 5 medical personnel. Dr. Abu Safia is a pediatrician who was 2 days later disappeared by the Israelis, and he is still in Israeli custody as we speak. A little bit later, actually in October of this year, Dr. Abu Safia was 2024. And then later in the month, we saw Sarah al-Quds fighters in Beit Hanun talking about, as they're setting a barrel bomb, talking about the fighters. The fighters said, "We will never abandon our positions. They came at us with robots," which is, again, he means these M113 APC suicide bombs, but we will never retreat. So the resistance has been all over these on the battlefield for the full 2 years of this war, and that's what we're seeing. Number 14 shows the industrial scale here. This is a photo from Al Jazeera, and this is what really caught the soldiers' attention, is that Gideon's chariots too, these were all seen lined up along the border. We saw these, and soldiers took pictures of them and shared them on social media. And this is the industrial scale that Army Radio is talking about. You can see it on the next slide as well. Again, another genocide tracker video from the Israelis. So look at that. It's just truck after truck, as far as you can see, loaded up with these APCs. The Jerusalem Post had a story that said that on acting orders of the IDF's Southern Command Chief, these deployments of vehicles has surged, with officers in the field reporting their usage has tripled. Forces on the ground testified to the movement of hundreds of these explosive-laden vehicles towards the Gaza border. This method protects our forces ahead of the ground incursion and enables faster movement. One of the officers said, over time, the techniques for operating these vehicles have emerged, ranging from towing them into position and to using robots. More recently, reports have surfaced regarding the development of explosive barrels. This is what I was telling you, that fit perfectly inside the back to maximize them. And the Jerusalem Post, the story is from, said that the intensity of the explosions can be heard 100 kilometers from Gaza. This is the complete industrial scale application of these weapons. We can look at number 16 because you can watch them now. So you see them on the truck. Here's the soldier showing you unloading them off the truck. And then the soldiers are going to watch as they deploy them here, destroying Palestinian homes and cheering it, because they are the TikTok army who don't want to fight, who just want to massacre civilians and destroy any semblance of life and society in the Gaza Strip. None of their hero stories from battle for 2 years have involved conflict, involved fighting. They all involve dressing up in captured clothing, playing on children's tricycles, and blowing up schools and people's homes, burning them, various different ways that we've all seen the TikTok army operate. Let's look at number 17, because there was also an operation in Jabalia. You can see the fighters here wrapping up the Shawad, the Qassam-built explosively formed penetrator, a large one here. And as the fighters are preparing it, they're reciting a poem from Tamim al-Barghouti, who is a prominent Palestinian poet from a prominent Palestinian literary family. It's just another example of what we've seen all throughout the war, of these fighters expressing themselves in nuanced and culturally significant ways that transcend the operation itself. And a good catch by Tamara, the poem is called Nasheed Morid by Tamim al-Barghouti. It translates as a disciple's anthem, is the poem that these fighters are reciting. And we've seen them doing this all the time. We've seen it on the walls. We've seen them write it on their weapons. We've seen them talking it out as they go. These fighters are deeply ingrained in the national project. And here the EFP is going to target those two Merkava tanks that you see, the red triangles drop on them. And it looks like it gets both of them. If you look to the left is where the explosion is going to happen. It looks like it blows pieces off the second one while targeting the first one. So a devastating hit in Jabalia. This operation was from earlier in September. A successful operation was executed in Jabalia. Now, just one quick note before we go on Yemen. As Nora said, the Yemeni resistance was able to target Eilat multiple times this week. 3 times drones got through this week. One yesterday left up to 20 people wounded in Israel, although usually the breakdown of those numbers are that 17 of them were just stressed out by this, but they count that as a casualty in Israel. Earlier in the week, we saw a Yafa drone hit Eilat and fly all the way over Eilat. So clearly they're penetrating Israeli air defenses in Eilat, and the Israelis bombed Yemen today in response. So we will be following the Yemeni front as we also follow the battle for Gaza City, but that is the resistance report for day 720 of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza.
Thank you so much, John. I mean, just those, I really appreciate your meticulous walkthrough of how these APCs are transformed into these car bombs and how they're being used to just, again, like you said, the most cowardly.
It's the most cowardly in a war of cowardice.
Yeah.
And, I received a message this morning
from coffee maker in the background.
Friends in northern Gaza who just evacuated their home because one of these things pulled up next to their building.
Oh, Jesus.
And so they instill terror, and they are terror. And, I don't think people can understand it, the scale of it, really, without that kind of in-depth explanation, John. So I'm really grateful for that, because these things are massively destructive bombs that are being used for the sole and explicit purpose of targeting civilian neighborhoods and destroying them for no remotely defensible military purpose. This is just pure criminality for the sake of criminality.
Yeah.
And it's also because they have such an influx. They have too many gifts from their American allies that are they're co-fighters in this war. I mean, on so many levels, these point to just what Israel is. Just having these to be able to just use them for whatever. And now that everyone in Gaza knows them and are terrified of them, they'll just drive them through a neighborhood to get rid of that neighborhood because the terror has been inflicted.
And that's what appears to have happened in this case. They may have eventually blown it up, but according to the account I received directly, the thing just went and parked in everyone's clear view, and that was a way to ethnically cleanse the neighborhood. People saw it, and they got their kids out. You know, people are not going to leave their kids and their elders there when one of these things rolls up. So it's a weapon of pure terror against civilians.
And it's several times. We've watched 2,000-pound bombs and seen what they do. This is the explosive capacity of several of those in one place on the ground level detonating up. So it's really, and the fact that they bragged about it, I mean, we should be used to it at this point, but just to be so proud of their cowardice and to embed it in their military doctrine, this cowardice.
Yeah. Sick and savage. We have a couple of things that we want to talk about. Ali, as you alluded to earlier in our interview with Ahmed, there are these, I think now 130 countries have done this recognition of a so-called Palestinian state, and the corporate media and all of these pundits and people involved with the Palestinian Authority, of course, are touting it as, this major milestone, a political victory for Palestinians. What is at the core here? How are we to understand and analyze what these recognitions mean and what they are in place of politically?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this actually, but maybe Asa, why don't you, just to bring people up to date, why don't you take us through some of the media you've put together, and then we'll talk about it, because I do have thoughts about this for sure.
I can't wait.
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, I mean, I think most of our viewers will know that several states this week announced that they were recognizing the Palestinian Authority as the state of Palestine. So, it's not anything really new in, there's lots of states around the world that already recognize the Palestinian Authority as the state of Palestine, but it was new in the sense of the states that did it. So some of Israel's most adamant allies have recognized now the Palestinian Authority as the so-called state of Palestine. So first of all, there was Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, and he declared in this in a speech that was posted to Twitter that, I mean, I think we'll spare you the actual speech.
Thank you for that.
It was quite boring. Basically, there was a lot of condemnation of Palestinian resistance, demanding that the so-called hostages are returned, and so on and so forth. And at the end, he said that we recognise the state of Palestine. That was in essence what he said. And of course, we know Keir Starmer is one of Israel's most adamant allies. Infamously, at the start of the genocide, said that Israel has that right to to besiege the Gaza Strip, to deprive Palestinians of water, electricity, petrol, and so forth. Yeah. Secondly,
what are some of the conditions that he placed on the recognition, though, Asa? You mentioned, I mean, they all, we can talk about Keir Starmer, but it was all coordinated. So France, Australia, Canada, the UK, and a few others, they all said the same things. They all, it's, yeah, I guess we can.
Yeah, it's conditional recognition on releasing the hostages, essentially, as they put it, which are,
and Hamas can have no role in the future Palestinian state.
Yeah. Which has to be disarmed.
Yeah. Has to be disarmed.
Yeah.
And so one wonders what are they recognizing? I mean, we associate recognition with an independent state, but if Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese of Australia and Keir Starmer and Mark Carney of Canada get to decide who can actually govern the state, then it's not independent, and you're not recognizing anything.
Plus, geographically, show us a map of this so-called state of Palestine.
Yeah, it's the West Bank and Gaza.
It's not even all of the West Bank. It's archipelago West Bank.
Well, I mean, Britain, for example, had a map. I haven't put. Maybe I should have put this in the doc.
There's a whole section missing.
The map is
north and south. Yeah.
They changed it from West Bank Palestinian territories to Palestine. So it's this kind of surface level recognition and not recognizing the reality of the fact of what the West Bank is. That it's these, as you said, this archipelago of disconnected, surrounded territories which are just completely besieged on a day-to-day basis. We talk to our colleagues and friends in the West Bank, and that's the reality. It's impossible or near impossible for Palestinians to freely travel between there.
Yeah, there's 900 checkpoints right now.
Yeah.
Why don't we look at the statement issued by the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Foreign Minister Penny Wong. And this again is typical. So you can apply this to Canada, the UK, France, to all of them. But I think the Australian one really makes the point. So They say effective today, the 21st of September, Australia formally recognizes the independent and sovereign state of Palestine. So let's see what that means, independent and sovereign. So in doing so, Australia recognizes the legitimate and long-held aspirations of the people of Palestine to a state of their own. Now, what's missing from that sentence? Doesn't use the word rights, aspirations. An aspiration is a wish. So there's no recognition of any Palestinian rights here. It's an aspiration. So no recognition of Palestinian rights, which fundamental one being the right of return. So Australia's recognition of Palestine today alongside Canada, the UK, etc., is part of a coordinated international effort to build new momentum for a two-state solution. So that's an admission. The first sentence says, we're recognizing an independent sovereign state. And by the time we get to the third sentence, we're told there is no such thing. It's just a PR effort to build momentum. So this is corporate jargon. And then they say that starting with the ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages taken in the atrocities of October 7th, 2023. So this is a restatement of Israel's lies and atrocity propaganda about October 7th. And of course, the so-called hostages who are still there, as John just told us, are prisoners of war, soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important point that, they call them hostages, but actually they are prisoners of war. These are all soldiers.
Yeah, so it's they say ceasefire in Gaza. They don't use the word genocide, and we'll talk more about that later. Then they say this is part of Australia's long-standing commitment to a two-state solution, which has always been the only path to enduring peace. This is, of course, to try to rewrite history. It is not, and to limit, again, any political possibility to this so-called two-state solution. Why is it the only possible path? Why isn't abolishing this racist, genocidal, colonial entity a path to peace, just as racist, genocidal, apartheid South Africa was abolished and replaced with a democratic state? That would be a path to peace, but we're not allowed to talk about that because, as we'll see more in the statement, the commitment is to Zionism and Jewish and colonial supremacy, not to anything to do with Palestinian rights. Then they say here, the president of the Palestinian Authority. Wait, that's odd. Didn't you in the first sentence just recognize the independent and sovereign state of Palestine? And now we're still talking about the president of the Palestinian Authority. So what? So the first sentence, what did we write? We recognize an independent sovereign state, but now we're talking about the president of the Palestinian Authority. So they've already withdrawn whatever recognition was there. Has restated its recognition of Israel's right to exist. Wow. The first mention of rights, and it's not Palestinians' rights. So this is not a statement recognizing Palestinian right to self-determination and statehood and existence. This is a declaration by the government of Australia of Israel's right to independence and sovereignty and existence, so-called, of course, Israel. There is no such thing in international law of a state having a right to exist. The only thing there is in international law is that people have self-determination. I've made this point before many times. East Germany has no right to exist. It's been abolished because Germany, the people decided to abolish.
Remember when Australia condemned the violence against one of their reporters, a lady at the anti-ICE protests in LA? She got hit with a rubber bullet, directly shot with one. We'll speak out when a white lady gets hit with a rubber bullet, but you won't effectively recognize the Palestinian state. Is it because they're brown people?
East Germany and reestablish, I should say, trying not to say a greater right, but I mean, that's what it is. Right?
It's their choice.
Yeah, so South Vietnam has no right to exist. Who's going to go and fight for South Vietnam's right to exist? There's no such thing. Doesn't exist. Peoples have a right to self-determination. Israel has no right to exist, nor does any other state. So again, the president of the Palestinian non-state has restated the right of Israel to exist, including commitments to hold democratic elections and enact significant reform to finance, governance, and education. And these are code words that go back decades into the Oslo process, which are classic colonial ruses. Because what are we talking about here? The colonial idea, the British colonial idea, as well as other, is that, oh yes, we're going to eventually give these colonies independence when they're ready. But they're not ready now. They're children. Yeah. We are the adults. So until they learn self-governance, which we have to rule them. And that's the modern version of that. So they have to have all these reform. And education here is the code word for changing the Palestinian curriculum and making it a Zionist pro-Israeli curriculum, which has been the agenda for decades and decades.
Yeah.
And
then yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Well, actually, I wanted to make a point about Mahmoud Abbas, but maybe you should finish the letter.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at the end of it. I just want to go through. So then they say the terrorist organization Hamas must have no role in Palestine. Wait, we recognized the independent and sovereign state of Palestine.
With
and here's
elections.
the Prime Minister of Australia telling the people of the supposedly independent and sovereign state of Palestine who isn't allowed to rule them, and defining the party that won the last relatively free election in part of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as a terrorist organization. So who gave the Prime Minister of Australia the right to do that and the chutzpah to do it in what purports to be a recognition of Palestinian sovereignty and independence?
Yeah.
And then they say, crucial work is underway across the international community, which means the countries that support Israel and are working with Israel to complete the genocide, to develop a credible peace plan that enables the reconstruction of Gaza. The reconstruction of Gaza, they're talking as if they're proceeding from the point at which the genocide has been completed. So there's nothing in here about stopping the genocide, stopping the murders, the massacres. There's been no mention of the mass murder at this point of what is almost certainly hundreds of thousands of people. That's not mentioned. It's not there. This is outrageous. This is vile. It's absolutely vile.
Yeah,
and then they say the leadership of the countries of the Arab League and the United States, Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, Mark Rubio, maybe Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg, is vital to this task. And the Arab tyrants who are doing business with Israel and who are shielding Israel and who are shooting down attempts to halt the genocide, allowing Israel to fly through their skies, to bomb our other Arab countries. Then they say Australia will continue to work with our international partners to help build on today's act of recognition. Now, again, if you read the statement from Mark Carney, the Australian Prime Minister, from Keir Starmer, it's all the same garbage. And what I want to say to people is, don't fall for this for a second. This isn't a step forward. I've had people telling me, oh, but it's a step forward. No, it's not. This is an effort to define Palestinians to define Palestinian rights out of existence. Notice, again, I emphasize this, the only mention of rights in this statement was Israeli rights, so-called Israeli rights. No mention of self-determination, no mention of the right of return, no mention of the right of Palestinian victims of genocide to justice, to restitution. No mention of accountability for the genocide that Australia, Canada, Britain, France, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Germany, not take Germany out because they're not involved in this recognition, all the other countries that are still involved in this genocide, in mass murdering the people of this allegedly independent and sovereign state, that all of these countries who are complicit in this ongoing genocide have not recognized any Palestinian rights. None. What they want to do is take a concentration camp and put a sign on it that says State of Palestine. And if anyone falls for this, I don't know what more we can say at this point, more than 30 years after the so-called Oslo Accords. This is just an attempt to revive that in the middle of
Hell yeah, get him, Ali.
the Holocaust.
And these are the very same countries that allowed the West Bank to be turned into a bunch of Bantustans that can never be a state because they're surrounded by a wall, because the settlement enterprise quadrupled under their Oslo fantasies. They're the ones who allowed this to happen, that didn't speak up when the West Bank was being turned into something that could not be a state. So I just find that part really rich. The elections part is really rich too, because the reason why there's not been elections is because of Mahmoud Abbas, and it's because of the international community that blocked elections because, wait for it, because they were going to lose. Every time they're going to lose. And the first time when Hamas won the election, all of these countries, they thought Abbas was going to win the elections. That's how little they understood about Palestine. And Condoleezza Rice fell off of her treadmill when she saw that Hamas won the elections, because they thought that Abbas was going to win. And since that election, they have not allowed elections to happen again, because every time it's been clear that Hamas will win those elections again.
Yeah.
And
So
every single time in history that one of these genocidal settler colonies were facing indigenous resistance, they defined it as terrorist. Every single time. The British in Ireland, the French in Algeria, the Americans in Vietnam. I mean, it's the same story everywhere. And then they end up handing over to the so-called terrorists. The same in Afghanistan. Now, Donald Trump is saying he wants Bagram Air Base built by the Soviet Union back.
And they built it.
So every single time, the ANC, the African National Congress, all these countries considered it a terrorist organization. Who do they think they're fooling here? And then, Tamara, can we show the tweet from Benjamin Netanyahu? His response, it's just part of it, but his response to this recognition, so-called recognition. That's the one where he says, let me just find it in my notes. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated.
So he's like being very paternalistic.
Yeah, here it is.
Like, just wait till your father gets home, sort of thing.
Yeah, so Netanyahu says, the response to the latest attempt to force upon us a terror state in the heart of our land will be given after my return from the United States. Stand by. What is that response going to be? That's a clear threat. We know what Israel does to Palestinians. It mass murders them. So it's going to include more land theft, more demolition of homes in the West Bank, more expulsions, more killings, more crimes, more vengeance, which will be meted out against the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And I ask you this, will France, will Canada, will Australia, will Portugal, will Malta, will all the other countries joining the circus do anything to prevent that or to punish Israel for it?
No,
you bet they won't. And they will have brought more vengeance and disaster on the heads of the Palestinian people. And it's important to say this because there are people, we just heard Ahmed Abu Tayma in that incredible interview earlier in the show, talking about how Palestinians tried everything, including the 2018 Great March of Return, a non-violent mass movement to assert their rights, not their aspirations, their rights. And Israel murdered hundreds of people, maimed thousands of people. And so are we going to say, oh, well, Palestinians brought it on themselves for going out and marching peacefully? That's why Palestinians did the October 7th resistance operation, because it was the only option to exercise their internationally recognized right to resist against a colonial occupation, a military occupation, which has...
That's how you toe the line, like, fully. Oh my God. That's how you perfectly toe the line. Calling October 7th a resistance operation.
Last summer being declared by the International Court of Justice finally to be inherently illegal in itself. And so they had the right to do that. Nobody can ever say, as all of these do, all of these countries hint at, that Hamas brought disaster on the Palestinian people, or the resistance, because the resistance isn't, we mustn't equate it only with Hamas. The resistance is wider than that. So let me rephrase that the resistance brought disaster on the Palestinian people by the October 7th operation, and they're to blame for it. And Mahmoud Abbas, the quisling collaborator, traitor in the West Bank, says it too, that the resistance brought disaster on the Palestinian people. Well, I'm telling you now, their so-called peaceful, diplomatic, aspirational momentum, circling back to the whiteboarding and brainstorming idea of a two-state solution, or whatever other colonial corporate garbage speak they want to add to this, that will bring disaster to the Palestinian people. It will bring more Israeli vengeance, more Israeli destruction, and none of them will lift a finger to stop it.
No, they'll just issue another condemnation or a statement, and with the other hand, they'll keep sending weapons and sign arms deals and.
Keir Starmer's spy planes are still flying over Gaza to help direct the genocide forces of Israel.
That's right.
We have the Mahmoud Abbas clip, I think, that we can show. I just want to make the quick point first that. At least Mahmoud Abbas, as you mentioned, Mahmoud Abbas was actually elected the president, the so-called president of the Palestinian Authority 20 years ago. 20 years ago. This is how long this guy's been in place. It's completely undemocratic. There was then legislative elections to the Palestinian Authority the following year, which Hamas won. And as John said, they haven't allowed elections to take place ever since. But at least, a very minimum, 81% of Palestinians want Mahmoud Abbas to step down. He's incredibly unpopular. And these are polls of the West Bank and Gaza Strip only, which, to be honest, I question the reliability of. But, even those polls show that the vast majority of Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip want him to step down. So this is someone who is not, by any stretch of the imagination, popular amongst Palestinians. And yet, of course, these so-called world leaders like Albanese are just fawning over the guy as if he's got some sort of democratic legitimacy, when the complete opposite is true. And this is the guy who they're fawning over at the UN and just condemned resistance at the UN.
Can we show the pictures of what's happening at the so-called Palestinian embassy in? Oh yeah, you've got the Abbas clip. Let's do that first. You wanted to show that, Asa.
Despite all what our people have suffered, we reject what Hamas carried out on the 7th of October. These actions that targeted Israeli civilians and took them hostages, because these actions do not represent the Palestinian people, nor do they represent their just struggle for freedom and independence. We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance. Hamas and other factions will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian National Authority as part of a process to build the institutions of...
Yeah, this is what a Palestinian Zionist looks and sounds like.
Yeah, that speech was written by Huckabee, probably.
Well, this Palestinian Zionist, Mahmoud Abbas, wasn't even allowed to go to New York to deliver this prostration and this boot licking and foot kissing of Israel and the Zionists. He had to do it by Zoom. He had to do it by Zoom because they wouldn't let him in. This is what collaboration and treachery gets you. Your masters spit on you and humiliate you, and the more you prostrate yourself before them, they spit on you and humiliate you even more. Let's go, if we can, unless someone else wants to say something about Mahmoud Abbas. But this is so
this was the role of the Palestinian Authority in London. The Palestinian Authority representative in London for several years now has been Hossam Zumlot, and their office in London was, after Keir Starmer's announcement, was upgraded from what was called a mission to what's now called an embassy. And they had this sort of ceremony of replacing the sign outside the embassy, boasting that it's now the embassy of the state of Palestine.
Yeah,
and
I want to say something about that, Asa. They did change the sign from, mission of the Palestinian Authority or whatever to embassy of the state of Palestine. And someone on X, on Twitter, recalled a Palestinian saying, and I asked my dad about it too, and he confirmed it, that they say it in his village, and it goes like this: بس ضايل ثلاث حدوات وفرس وبصير خيال. And let me translate that. It's a funny story or a saying about a man is going down the road and he finds a horseshoe and he picks it up and he runs back to his village and he shows everyone, look what I found a horseshoe. Now all I need is 3 more horseshoes and a horse and I'll be a horseman. That's what this is.
Yeah, seems apt. Well, I mean, you can see British viewers, especially from this photo, will probably recognise that the ceremony was attended by a who's who of Labour government cronies, not even the top level cronies, it has to be said, but attendees included the Middle East Minister Hamish Falconer, and in this tweet, the Health Minister Wes Streeting, who posted this sort of selfie with Hossam Zumlot. Streeting is a hard right Blairite in the Labour Party, and he's often viewed as a likely successor to Starmer as Prime Minister, and he's been listed by Labour Friends of Israel as one of its supporters. And at the beginning of the genocide, all these people were lining up to say that they opposed a ceasefire, very early on, and all these kind of disgusting things.
Look how happy they are.
Yeah.
Well, all the most bitter enemies of the Palestinian people, undying supporters of this genocide, are supporting this and celebrating it.
Yeah, and they see it as a way to kind of. As we said, not everyone in this photo is
right.
Sorry,
it's to change the subject from something.
Yeah,
it's to change the subject, and they see it as a way to kind of cover up for their sins at the beginning of the genocide, where they were just openly supporting Israel, and the government is still openly supporting Israel. But now they're able to say to their constituent, well, we recognise the state of Palestine is something that they can say, and they can kind of fool people onto sort of just change the subject, as you said. Which you've made the point, Ali, that what they really should have been talking about at the UN is this commission of inquiry.
Which I think we can show, just to remind people that I think less than 2 weeks ago, the independent UN Commission of Inquiry, this is an independent, these aren't people who aren't answerable to America's poodle and Israel's poodle, Antonio Guterres. These are independent international figures, and they concluded that Israel is, in fact, committing genocide in Gaza. And imagine if an independent commission had concluded that Russia is committing genocide in Ukraine, for example. What would Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, all those clowns, be talking about now? Nobody's mentioning this. And remember, as Craig Mokhaiber reminded us just a couple of weeks ago when we had him on this live stream, that I think it's today, I have to check the date, but it was last September, I think 24th or 25th, that the UN General Assembly passed that resolution giving Israel a deadline of 12 months to stop, to end its occupation, to withdraw completely from occupied Palestinian territories. And nobody is talking about that. The only discussion at the UN should be, what sanctions are we going to impose? Not even Mahmoud Abbas talked about that, because he was told, you'll get your little fake recognition if you shut up about any accountability. Don't you dare bring up accountability, because that's not how the game is played. And let's look, you marked this for us, Asa, Antonio Guterres' tweet about this was just yesterday or 2 days ago, I think. He says, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is morally, legally, and politically intolerable. The nightmare must stop. Today I called on world leaders to do all they can to ensure the two-state solution prevails for the people of Israel, Palestine, and all humanity. What is going on here?
It's as if someone had said during the end of the Second World War that the Nazi-Jewish conflict was morally, legally, and politically intolerable.
The black-white conflict in South Africa during apartheid, which is in fact what the Western liberal press did do during apartheid. They did try to present that atrocious, racist, white supremacist regime that murdered and oppressed people in South Africa just for being indigenous black people in South Africa. They called it a conflict, and they called it complicated, and they called it nuanced, and they called it all the things they claim this genocide is. And it is absolutely outrageous. Antonio Guterres had no excuse not to call this a genocide over the last 2 years, but not to use that word after the independent UN Commission of Inquiry concluded this genocide is absolutely outrageous. And he doesn't mention the genocide. He doesn't mention stopping the genocide. He doesn't mention accountability. He equates the victims of genocide with the perpetrators. This is Ahmed Abu Tema said it. Ahmed Abultema said that this international system has completely failed and has to be replaced by something else, and nobody should celebrate this. We should condemn it. We should condemn these fake recognitions. We should condemn the continued use of the two-state fantasy to distract from the genocide that all these countries are helping Israel to perpetrate. And the sole focus should be on accountability and pressure to stop this genocide and bring all those who are responsible for it to justice.
Including those states that have been enabling and cheerleading this genocide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bit passionate about this. But, just watching it over the last period, it's disgusting.
No, it makes you
it's
insane.
Disgusting when you see what they're doing in Gaza. When you look at what Ahmed talked about and what Nora reported at the beginning of this program, as she has every week over the last 720 days, and none of them are talking about it.
Yeah, and there's people of goodwill who don't really understand. I'm talking about in solidarity movements, especially in the UK, who don't really understand the true role of the Palestinian Authority. Like Hossam Zomlot, for example, regularly leads Palestine solidarity demonstrations in London, or at least turns up to them. And people don't really understand that.
Hossam Zomlot distributed sweets. We just heard Ahmed Abultema telling us that a cup of coffee was a dream in Gaza, that he couldn't go and get food because he didn't have energy to go and get food. And Hossam Zomlot and the so-called embassy of the so-called state of Palestine that exists only in their imagination was distributing sweets publicly.
Yeah, I mean, that really says it all. They are during the solidarity movement for South Africa, during the anti-apartheid movement, there was no part of the solidarity movement which supported the Bantustans, these fake states that the white supremacist regime set up as so-called homelands for what they called the Bantu people. Nobody recognized them, but unfortunately, people in solidarity movements in the West do recognize the Palestinian Authority, and I think there's a problem.
It is. There are just one or two things that we should also talk about as this farce, as this circus around so-called recognition of a so-called state carries on. Spain, meanwhile, announced that it was sending a naval ship to accompany or protect or something the flotilla, the Gaza Sumud flotilla that I think there's about 50 boats that have been leaving kind of in successive waves from southern Europe. The Spanish government said that they are sending a Navy boat. The Italian government is now sending 2 Navy boats. This is after the entire country was shut down by students and activists and union members and school teachers and municipal workers the other day. And then there was this fiery speech by Colombia's Gustavo Petro yesterday at the UN General Assembly. Ali, what can you say about these international developments?
Well, the flotilla is one of the things that gives us and gives people in Gaza a lot of hope. People in Gaza are saying we're waiting for the flotilla. We want it to break the siege. And it's clearly a bit more of a challenge for Israel because of the sheer number of boats this time and the amount of global popular support that we're seeing for it and the fact that many prominent international figures are on it. And Israel has been issuing direct threats to it. They've labeled it a Hamas flotilla, which is a very serious, that isn't just their usual cheap propaganda. That's laying a ground potentially to attack it, which is exactly what Israel did against the flotilla in 2010, which included several boats, the largest of which was the Mavi Marmara, which Israel attacked and murdered 10 people on that ship and kidnapped everyone on board, and they injured many other people. So it's clearly laying the ground for a potential military attack against this civilian humanitarian flotilla. And why wouldn't Israel do it? Because nobody's ever stopped them in the past and they've never faced consequences. But the announcement by Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, of sending a warship is, I think, a significant departure. Because remember, we've said before that all these EU countries, they sent boats to protect, they sent their navies to protect shipping to Israel in the Red Sea, so that, or through the Red Sea to break the Yemeni blockade, which is designed to stop the genocide, but they never sent a ship to protect a humanitarian flotilla to Gaza. So what Pedro Sanchez said in his statement is that the government of Spain demands that international law be complied with and that the right of its citizens to navigate the Mediterranean under safe conditions be respected. Tomorrow, a maritime action vessel, I think it's a naval vessel, equipped with all necessary means, will set sail from Cartagena in case it is necessary to assist the flotilla and carry out any rescue. Now, people have pointed out that that wording is somewhat loopholey. Yep. Carry out a rescue, doesn't suggest that it suggests they're going to wait until Israel attacks it and see what they can do to help. But nonetheless, it does make it much harder for Israel to carry out a military attack if warships of allied countries are sailing along with it in order to protect at least they're citizens who are on these boats, because there are citizens from all over Europe and the world. And indeed, it's been reported, although not announced quite so prominently, that Italy is sending a ship as well. I think that was confirmed by the defense minister in Italy, whereas this announcement was made by the Prime Minister of Spain himself, Pedro Sanchez, at a podium in New York at the United Nations. So this is quite a significant departure. And why not do it? I mean, why isn't Turkey, which has a very large navy, sending its navy and placing Israel before a choice? Either this flotilla goes through and it breaks the siege, or you attack the navies of Turkey, Spain, Italy, and whoever else, a coalition of the willing, let's call it. And that's the least that they should be doing. And again, reminding ourselves of what Craig Mukhaibar tells us time and again, that the Genocide Convention, to which all these countries are signatories, gives them the legal authority, indeed the obligation to do this. Article 1 of the convention is that the signatories undertake to prevent and to punish the crime of genocide. So and it doesn't limit the action that they're allowed to take. So I hope that Spain, this is symbolic and it's important in that sense. Here's me supporting symbolism for once. People are always telling me, Ali, accept something. Okay, I'm accepting the symbolism of Spain finally breaking and Italy finally breaking with the, Israel can never be challenged consensus, but it has to be more than symbolism.
Yeah.
But this, I'll say this is a start. If other countries follow and Spain holds its ground, it's certainly unprecedented. We can say that.
Well, the ships are supposed to land in Gaza in the next few days, so we're going to be watching that very closely, of course. Let's look at the website. Oh boy, yeah. There's our colleague Michael Brown's fantastic report on John Fetterman, of course, of Pennsylvania, denying the Gaza genocide, claiming it's a just war. Again, Michael does an extraordinary sacrifice for so many of us watching mainstream media and following these political monsters, holding them accountable. So go ahead and give his article a read. Of course, we have some extraordinary and heart-wrenching features by our writers in Gaza. That is a new one. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read the title.
Who profited off 7 October? It's about. It's a very interesting article by Jim DeBrose about the question of what extent did Israelis have prior knowledge of 7th of October. It's interesting.
Excellent. And of course, other features, and I know our colleague David Cronin has done some really, really great investigations around the EU lately. And Ali, you were not here last week, of course, and I did my best to thank our donors, but I know you probably have a little list that you want to get through, thanking people who are supporting the Electronic Intifada, and making sure that this live stream and our publication remains strong and vibrant. So,
yes, thank you, Nora. And thank you, as always, to everyone who makes all our work possible. We can't do this without you. And I've got a slightly longer list because I was away last week. So I'm going to read a few names. Again, this is just to represent so many of you who make our work possible. And I wish I could thank each and every one. And so I'm going to thank Robert, Andrea, Dina, Sam, Morton, Yvette, Pam, Carlos, Skylar, Conrad, Fakhreddin, Bisan, Maureen, Maximilian, Wendy, Jung, Thomas, Andrew, Mark, Hassan, Rusiada, Steve, Abdu, Scott, and Heidi. Thank you to each and every one of you, and to all of you who are here with us week in, week out, who read all these articles, especially who read and share the work of our colleagues in Gaza. It's more important than ever to keep their voices loud, to make sure that people are reading them, read out their articles, read them out on street corners. I mean, I'm serious. Get this stuff out there. People have to hear. Ahmed's story today was his account, it was so extraordinary. And he said that there aren't words, and I get what he means by that. But at the same time, our writers, our contributors are struggling to find those words and convey those realities. And I feel like we all have an obligation and responsibility to get them seen and heard by as many people as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ali. And as always, and sign up for our email list at electronicintifada.net. You can hit the donate now link there, or at the bottom of this video.
Yeah, and just to Nora, people have to sign up for the email list. It's the Get Updates link at the top left, and then on the other side is the donation link. But the Get Updates is where you can sign up for the email list and stay up to date on everything we're doing.
Wonderful, thank you. And as always, thank you to Tamara Nassar for directing and producing this live stream and everything that she does in preparation and post-production, everything. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you to Ellie Gerzon for social media production. Thank you to Pierre Loisel for condensing this stream into a package for radio stations around the world. And thank you to our incredible staff, Maureen Claire Murphy, Michael F. Brown, David Cronin, Leah Caldwell, Omar Karmi, everyone at the Electronic Intifada. And on behalf of myself and John, Asa, Ali, and Tamara, thank you. And we will see you next week.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country.
I'm going to leave it there. I will see you guys around. Going to be gaming tonight, so peace out. Free Palestine, fuck Israel, crush Zionism forever.